The wind that prowls the Carpathian mountains carries many voices, but none as ancient, none as patient, none as hungry as the one who waits within the fortress of stone and shadow. High above the mortal world, in a land where the night lasts longer than memory, stands Castle Dracula, its black towers spearing into the moonlit sky like the fingers of some buried titan trying to claw its way back into the world. The villagers of Transylvania dare not look upon it for long, for they believe, rightfully, that the castle looks back. It is here, in this forgotten corner between myth and history, that the story of our descent begins. For centuries, the world has spoken of Dracula as a creature, a monster, a vampire, a ghost that stalks the living. But that is the simple version. That is the tale told by trembling voices around candlelit tables. What lies beneath the legend is far darker, far older, and far more human. Because Dracula, before he became a nightmare, was a man, a mind, a will, an ambition so vast it refused to die even after the body did. This story is not merely about blood or immortality. It is about the machinery of a mind twisted across centuries. A mind sharpened by war, loneliness, desire, and the bitter cold of endless survival. A mind that looks upon humanity the way a wolf looks upon sheep, not cruelly, but inevitably. What happens to a soul when time is no longer a river but an ocean without shore? What becomes of a man when every friend, every lover, every enemy, every memory turns to dust, yet he remains watching, waiting, hungering? Here, in the shadow of the Carpathian peaks, we attempt to answer those questions. We will walk through the corridors of Dracula's psyche, the way one walks through the halls of his castle, slowly, carefully, for the walls themselves seem to breathe. We will stand in the echo of his victories, feel the hollow in his immortal heart, and witness the monstrous logic that shapes his every action. We will explore how a predator thinks, how power corrupts, how desire entangles, and how even the most terrifying creature is shaped by wounds older than memory. Each part of this tale reveals a hidden chamber of his mind. You will see him not only as the creature who rises with the moon, but as the warrior king who once swore to protect his land. Not only as the seducer who drinks from the throat, but as the lonely soul who seeks connection in the only way he remembers. Not only as a monster, but as a tragedy. And yet, be warned. Understanding a monster changes you. It asks you to look into the dark, and worse, it asks you to let the dark look back. Tonight, our journey begins at the gates of his domain, where the forests whisper his name and the stones remember his footsteps. But before we cross into the castle, before we enter the labyrinth of his predatory mind, there is one truth you must hold close. Dracula is terrifying not because he is inhuman, but because he was once exactly like us. In Chapter 1, we will open the first door, the mind of the predator, the moment when Jonathan Harker first steps into Castle Dracula, unaware that every movement he makes is already being studied, dissected, understood. If you wish to descend fully into this Gothic abyss, to explore every hidden chamber of the Count's psychology, then stay with me through this long, dark journey. And if you wish this tale to continue, subscribe to the channel, for the shadows grow deeper and the night is only just beginning. Chapter 1. The Predator Who Watches the Mind. The mind of Count Dracula is not a chamber of rage or a den of wild hunger. It is something far more unsettling. His thoughts are arranged like a cathedral of shadows, vast, echoing, ordered by ancient logic, and illuminated only by the cold light of predation. To enter his psyche is to step into a world where instinct has been refined into philosophy, where silence becomes strategy, and where hunger is not merely a physical need, but an intellectual ritual. Dracula does not hunt as ordinary monsters do. He does not lash out or chase or snarl. His hunt begins long before the first confrontation, long before blood is spilled. He begins in the quiet space of human thought, in the vulnerability of the mind, long before the body ever realizes it is doomed. When Jonathan Harker traveled through the Carpathian Mountains toward the castle, he did not know that the Count had already begun the hunt days before his arrival. Dracula had read Jonathan's letters, studied his handwriting, analyzed the rhythm of his sentences and the courtesy embedded in every phrase. He understood the man's politeness, his insecurity, his optimism, his limits. To Dracula, every line of ink was a window, every word was a revealing crack. Humans imagine themselves layered and complex. To him, they are transparent, fragile glass sculptures lit by the faintest candle of fear. While Jonathan's carriage rattled through the mountain pass, the Count stood on the highest tower of his fortress, watching the road coil like a serpent below. He had not moved for hours, perhaps for days. His stillness was not the stillness of peace, but of calculation. The patience of a hunter who has watched centuries pass like drifting smoke. The mountains themselves seemed to hush in his presence, as though nature recognized a predator carved from something older than the stone it stood on. Dracula's intelligence is the quiet blade behind every gesture. He has seen kingdoms rise and fall like tides. He has watched priests preach their doctrines, soldiers die for them, and rulers rewrite them. He has observed humanity from every angle, from throne rooms to plague-stricken villages, and every observation has sharpened him. His mind is not a library of memories. It is an arsenal. Each lesson learned becomes a weapon. Mortals learn through life. Dracula learns through eternity. When Jonathan first stepped through the gates of Castle Dracula, he carried with him a traveler's curiosity, a gentleman's politeness, and a subtle fear he did not yet understand. Dracula noticed it instantly, the slight trembling in Jonathan's hand, the widening of his pupils, the stiffness of his posture as he glanced around the dark hall. A single gesture was enough for Dracula to map the pathways of Jonathan's thoughts. The Count did not need to guess. He knew. Just as a wolf knows the trembling of a deer's muscles, just as a hawk knows the shift in air beneath its prey, Dracula knew Jonathan's mind the moment the young man entered his domain. He spoke softly, with that ancient voice that feels carved from the stone walls themselves. He asked questions, not out of politeness, but out of design. Each question was a small incision. Each answer was a revelation. "Do you write often to your fiancé, Mr. Harker? Are you a religious man? What do you think of my country?" On the surface, the inquiries sounded harmless, conversational. But beneath each one lay the cold intent of a surgeon probing a wound. Dracula was not seeking information. He was building a map, one that would allow him to break Jonathan's defenses with the slightest touch. Jonathan did not understand why he felt observed, even when the Count was silent. He felt the castle breathing around him, listening. He felt the air grow heavy when Dracula walked past, as though the atmosphere itself recognized its master. He felt a sense of inevitability, though he could not name it. This was Dracula's calm, not the calm of peace, but the calm of a creature who knows the outcome before the struggle begins. A creature who understands that panic is for those who fear time. But Dracula has eternity on his side. He moves like someone unthreatened by haste. He speaks as one who knows his voice cannot be refused. He watches with the slow certainty of a predator that has perfected its craft through blood and centuries. There is no urgency in him because there is no doubt. The hunt is not a moment. It is a process. It begins in the mind. It ends only when the victim's will bends beneath his. As Jonathan slept in his chamber that first night, he did not know that Dracula stood silently outside the door, breathing not at all, listening to the rhythm of Jonathan's heartbeat. Not because he needed to, but because the sound revealed everything: the speed of fear, the hesitation of trust, the warmth of innocence. A heartbeat tells truths the tongue will never confess. To Dracula, the heart is not a source of blood alone, it is a voice. There, in the cold corridor, Dracula realized something unexpected. Jonathan was not merely weak. He was not merely afraid. He was curious. And curiosity is the Achilles heel of every human mind. A man driven by fear can be predicted. A man driven by desire can be manipulated. But a man driven by curiosity will walk into darkness willingly, searching for meaning in the very thing that will devour him. This discovery pleased Dracula more than any scent of blood could have. For though he had shed almost every human emotion, curiosity, its echo, its distant shadow, remained within him. It bound him to those he hunted, an invisible tether connecting predator and prey. As the moon crawled across the sky and the wolves howled in the ravine below, Dracula stepped back into the darkness, leaving Jonathan to his uneasy dreams. The hunt was not about to begin. It had already begun. Jonathan simply had not realized it. The web had been set, the mind had been marked, and Dracula, patient, ancient, inevitable, had already stepped inside the labyrinth of the young man's thoughts. And once Dracula enters a mind, he never truly leaves. Chapter 2: The Curse of the Endless Night. Time stretches endlessly in the dark, an oppressive weight pressing upon every thought, every memory. Mortals speak of eternity as a gift, a treasure beyond death, a chance to linger while the world spins on. Yet immortality conceals a far darker truth. It is not freedom, but decay of the soul. Dracula has endured centuries, and in doing so, the mind has become a labyrinth of shadows. Memory, once vibrant and precise, now twists and fades, leaving only echoes of lives long vanished. Empires rise and fall, civilizations crumble to dust, and still Dracula observes, untouched, burdened with a weight that no mortal could endure. Solitude reigns as both companion and tormentor. Dracula has watched generations bloom and wither, villages swallowed by time, kings and peasants alike succumbing to mortality, and yet the eternal presence persists. Faces blur, names dissolve, cities transform beyond recognition, while Dracula remains, drifting through the centuries, detached from the pulse of human life. Loneliness is no longer mere absence. It is a living entity, pressing cold and relentless as the wind over desolate mountains, creeping into stone halls and shadowed corridors. Memories haunt with both beauty and cruelty. Childhood laughter echoes faintly in halls long vanished, fragile as candlelight against the dark stone of his castle. The warmth of family hands, the voices of parents and comrades in arms, all exist now only as distant whispers. Victories, celebrations, fleeting joys, all have dissolved beneath the relentless march of time. In Dracula's mind, memory is a knife that cuts both ways, a reminder of what was cherished and a torment of what has been lost forever. Each recollection highlights the unbridgeable chasm between eternity and the mortal world. The passage of centuries transforms perception itself. Mortals live and die within rhythms that are brief and comprehensible. Dracula endures beyond all measure, an observer of fleeting lives. Love, trust, even the briefest human connection, passes only to vanish, leaving behind echoes and hunger. The eternal gaze witnesses generations rise and fall, histories rewritten, languages forgotten, yet remains unaltered, unclaimed by time. Life flows around Dracula, vibrant and unstoppable, yet participation is forbidden. Observation is the only option, and isolation its constant companion. Hunger evolves alongside solitude. Blood sustains the body, yet connection sustains the mind. The fleeting presence of mortals, their warmth, fear, vitality, all offer temporary bridges across centuries, fragile tethers to existence. Each heartbeat drawn, each life touched, underscores the eternal separation. Hunger becomes both sustenance and longing, a craving for life's warmth that cannot be fully possessed. Isolation transforms desire into obsession, and feeding becomes more than survival. It is the attempt to touch, even momentarily, the pulse of the world from which Dracula remains a part. The weight of Victorian anxieties mirrors the eternal curse. Society trembled at change, at the loss of meaning, at the erosion of moral and social certainties. Dracula witnesses this fear magnified across centuries. Civilizations crumble, traditions dissolve, human significance diminishes. Immortality heightens awareness of fragility, making the passage of centuries almost unbearable. Order, morality, familiar structures, all vanish, leaving a cold landscape in which connection is fleeting, and every heartbeat is a reminder of impermanence. Control emerges as both defense and necessity. Centuries of observation sharpen the mind into a precise instrument, the only tool available to maintain structure against chaos. Each mortal encountered becomes a measure of influence. Every interaction, a subtle assertion of order. Observation transforms into mastery, endurance into obsession. Solitude and hunger together forge a psyche attuned to dominion. Careful orchestration of fleeting lives, subtle manipulation, patient governance of moments otherwise doomed to vanish. Dracula's castle itself reflects this condition of being. Cold stone corridors, echoing chambers, shadowed halls, extensions of his mind, mirror the order imposed upon endless time. Here, mastery is possible, walls can be controlled, silence shaped. Yet even dominion over stone cannot erase emptiness. Every footstep echoes centuries of isolation. Every locked door, every empty hall reminds that connection is fleeting. Shadows stretch unbroken, carrying both control and despair. From this crucible emerges a darker truth. Centuries of loneliness breed obsession. The mind, confronted by eternity, seeks control where mortality offers none. Influence over fragile lives, mastery of ephemeral moments, all become necessities, anchors against the relentless march of years. Hunger is no longer only for blood, but for significance, for tethered connection, for a sense of order against drifting time. Loneliness becomes strategy. Isolation transforms into subtle tyranny. Immortality, therefore, is both curse and crucible. Compassion erodes, desire reshapes, and memory becomes both gift and torment. Hunger intertwines with the need to dominate, forging a mind patient and obsessive, precise and unyielding. Even as centuries pass and the world transforms beyond recognition, control offers the only certainty, the solitary bulwark against me. And yet, beneath the hunger and obsession lies a seed of something deeper, a longing beyond control, a craving beyond influence. The curse of the endless night is not only isolation or erosion of time, not merely the compulsion to dominate, it is the recognition that connection, intimacy, and warmth remain forever out of reach. Loneliness across centuries shapes thought and will, forming the foundation for the next stage of the psyche. An unrelenting obsession with mastery, the first true shadow of what lies beneath, waiting to unfold. Thus, the curse endures. Centuries fold upon centuries, each layer adding weight to memory, hunger, and isolation. The eternal night stretches unbroken, shaping mind and will, forging a consciousness attuned to every heartbeat, every fear, every fleeting connection. In this darkness, the architecture of loneliness constructs the first pillars of obsession, laying the groundwork for the next trait of Dracula's mind, a compulsion to command, dominate, and impose structure upon a world that drifts forever beyond reach. Chapter 3: Power, Control, and Domination. Centuries of existence sharpen the mind into a tool of precision. Power is no longer mere survival. It is the architecture of influence, a mechanism to impose order upon a world that moves relentlessly beyond reach. Dracula commands not just the darkness, but its creatures, bending wolves, shadows, and storm-swept winds to silent obedience. Authority extends beyond mortal comprehension. Subtle gestures, hypnotic gazes, whispered suggestions, each a thread in a web of domination, each a quiet conquest of will. The mind learns to measure, to manipulate, to anticipate. Power is survival refined, and survival demands mastery. Humanity is fragile in comparison. Mortals, fleeting in their joys, bound by limitations of body and time, become subjects upon which influence is tested. Dracula observes the smallest tremor of fear, the hesitation of curiosity, the fleeting spark of defiance, and turns them into instruments. Charm is wielded as a scalpel, words as chains. The mortal mind bends easily when faced with the inevitability of the eternal, when confronted with patience honed over centuries. Hypnosis is not sorcery, but study. Possession is not domination alone, but subtle orchestration. Each encounter reveals the psychology of control, each act of subjugation a reflection of the centuries spent observing and learning. Power demands its counterpart, the terror of powerlessness. In the human past, kings fell, warriors lost, empires crumbled. Dracula remembers the weight of crowns, the roar of armies, the betrayal of those who once pledged loyalty. Immortality preserves the body, but magnifies memory. And memory recalls the agony of defeat, the humiliation of impotence. Control becomes an obsession born of trauma. Every mortal interaction, every fragile heartbeat is a rehearsal of dominion, a strategy to ensure that power is never again denied. The ghosts of fallen kingdoms haunt the mind, whispering the necessity of absolute authority over every fleeting presence. Control extends beyond physical mastery. The mind itself is prey. Dracula disassembles thought, breaks resolve, and reconstructs perception. Victims falter under subtle suggestions. Confidence erodes beneath unseen pressure. Words and gestures create invisible cages. Fear is both the lock and the key. Observation becomes intrusion. Patience becomes weapon. The art of manipulation surpasses mere violence, revealing the profound understanding of human vulnerability. Mind yields before body, and every conquered thought becomes testament to the patient, relentless will that centuries of isolation have wrought. Victorian fears mirror these powers of domination. Society trembled at the thought of influence unseen, of subtle control exerted from shadows, of loss of autonomy and the collapse of reason. Dracula embodies these anxieties amplified across time, a figure both aristocratic and monstrous, capable of imposing his will upon lives too brief to resist. Every manipulation, every subtle exertion of authority becomes a reflection of that cultural terror. The predator hidden among the civilized, the intellect and instinct combined into perfect, unseen control. Yet power alone is insufficient. Domination, even mastery of mind and body, cannot fill the void left by centuries of isolation. Hunger persists, transformed into desire for connection, even as cruelty enforces distance. Every command, every subtle coercion, is entwined with a craving that cannot be sated by fear or obedience alone. Control becomes a substitute for intimacy, mastery a fleeting echo of lost communion. Immortality and solitude have forged the mind into a predator, but desire lingers beneath the surface, a shadow that cannot be extinguished by authority. Dracula's influence is precise, deliberate, and patient. Wolves obey, storms obey, shadows bend, yet it is in the subtlest manipulations that power achieves perfection. A glance, a pause, a whispered word, and the mortal mind bends. Fear becomes fascination. Hesitation becomes compliance. Centuries of study have revealed that control is not brute force alone, but anticipation, understanding, and the patient orchestration of every variable. Life itself becomes a stage, and each mortal presence a player guided by invisible hands. The castle mirrors the psyche. Every hall, every staircase, every echoing chamber serves both purpose and symbolism. Within these walls, dominance is maintained, influence cultivated, and isolation enforced. Yet the structure is also a reflection of the eternal hunger beneath the exercise of power. Each interaction, each moment of submission or fear, carries the reminder that domination cannot replace connection, that mastery cannot fulfill desire. Power is both a shield and a confession, revealing the vulnerability that centuries of solitude have hidden beneath a veneer of control. From the endless night arises a darker truth. Control is both necessity and obsession. It tempers hunger, frames memory, and structures solitude into patterns comprehensible to the mind. Yet it cannot fill the void left by immortality, cannot soothe the ache of centuries, cannot replace the warmth of human connection long since vanished. And so, desire persists beneath mastery, seduction lies beneath authority, and the shadows of centuries whisper of cravings that control alone cannot satisfy. Thus, even in dominion, Dracula remains tethered to a deeper hunger, an obsession that extends beyond survival. Power is a framework, authority a method, and manipulation a discipline, but beneath them all pulses a craving for what cannot be commanded, what cannot be captured. Control is the armor forged by solitude, the art honed by centuries of observation. But desire lies beneath, waiting to surface, waiting to shape the mind and the night in ways that mastery alone cannot. The endless night stretches onward. Wolves slink at command, shadows shift with silent obedience, storms bend to will, but the mind hungers still. Every heartbeat observed, every subtle surrender gained, is a reminder that control, though potent, is never complete. There exists a shadow behind the shadow of mastery, a desire for intimacy that cannot be forced, a longing that centuries cannot extinguish. And from this shadow will emerge the next facet of the psyche, forbidden desire, seductive, intimate, and terrifying, a truth more dangerous than domination, more compelling than fear. Chapter 4: Forbidden Desire, the Seductive Terror of Dracula. In the hush of candle shadows, desire coils like a serpent beneath the floorboards of the night. Power alone cannot quiet it, for dominance is but a cold companion, precise, controlled, obedient. Yet beneath Dracula's mastery lies a darker pulse, a hunger that is neither purely predatory nor entirely monstrous. It is forbidden, treacherous, intimate, an echo of the human heart long thought extinguished. Through ages of solitude, repression fermented into temptation, growing tender and violent at once. Thus begins the seduction that has haunted centuries, beautiful in its unfolding, horrifying in its consequence. Victorian minds trembled before emotion unbound, naming it danger, calling it sin. Desire was a creature locked behind lace and etiquette, suffocating under propriety's weight. But Dracula embodies everything that age feared. His presence bends the unspoken into the visible. Every whispered breath becomes confession, every stolen glance a surrender. Blood, the crimson thread that mortal life depends upon, transforms under his shadow into the symbol of yearning itself. It is sustenance, yet it is more. The essence shared, exchanged, tasted. Forbidden desire runs through it like fire through oil, igniting the soul's secret corners. His approach is slow, patient, enveloping. Seduction is an art honed through centuries, not through affection, but through understanding the tremble that lives beneath mortal restraint. The air thickens when he draws a sentence, when silence stretches between heartbeat and breath, when a figure stands too still in a solitary room. Beauty glimmers at the edge of terror, a hand extended with impossible grace, eyes dark as ancient storms, yet lit with a promise, half gentle, half devouring. His presence turns fear into fascination, dread into longing. Mortality leans toward him not by force, but by an instinct deeper than caution. The bite is the final expression of that forbidden communion. Not mere violence, nor merely hunger. It is an intimate psychological exchange, older than death, deeper than desire. The skin breaks, and with it the boundaries of the self. Warmth is shared, life spills willingly, fear dissolves into trembling surrender. In that moment, the mortal recognizes a terrible truth. The desire was always mutual. Terror merges with ecstasy. Revulsion dances with fascination. The duality of temptation reveals itself fully, beautiful in the way moonlight touches untouched skin, horrifying in the knowledge that the moment marks the end of innocence. Every hidden instinct awakens in his presence. The Victorian world hid longing behind duty, craving behind decorum, passion behind locked doors and hushed tones. Yet Dracula becomes the embodiment of everything that society suppressed. His existence speaks to the repressed impulse, to the desire to be seen without disguise, to be touched without restraint. He is the shadow of instinct, rising against centuries of order. In his gaze, mortals confront their own unspoken wants, their own contradictions, longing for what terrifies them, reaching toward what may destroy them. But beneath the seductive terror lies a truth far more tragic. Dracula desires connection, yet only knows how to consume. Centuries of isolation turned yearning into hunger, affection into domination, longing into predation. He approaches the living not with malice alone, but with the desperation of one who has forgotten how to be touched without conquering, how to be loved without devouring. Every encounter reveals the ache of an ancient loneliness. Every act of seduction masks a wound deeper than the night he commands. Desire becomes corruption because he no longer remembers how else desire may exist. And so he stands at the boundary between beauty and horror, between yearning and annihilation. Mortals draw nearer, drawn by the magnetic pull of the forbidden, sensing the tragedy beneath the terror. They feel the way his presence lingers like memory itself, soft, haunting, irresistible. But when desire meets hunger, fate darkens. Dracula cannot give without taking, cannot touch without consuming, cannot love without turning the beloved into an echo of himself. This is the heart of his seductive terror, the longing for intimacy entwined inescapably with destruction. The centuries have carved this duality into his being. His touch promises ecstasy, yet guarantees oblivion. Temptation glows with forbidden beauty, yet beneath the softness lies the predator's fang. What mortals call desire, he knows as both curse and craving. And behind it, buried deeper than hunger, deeper than longing, rests the ancient wound that shaped him. A wound older than immortality. A wound that no seduction, no dominion, no stolen heartbeat has ever filled. A wound that even the endless night cannot consume. Soon, the truth of that wound will rise from the shadows. Soon, the tragedy behind the monster will reveal itself, and with it, the final chapter of Dracula's mind will unfold. Chapter 5. The Tragic Mind. Dracula's lost humanity and eternal struggle. Long before the night claimed him, before the hunger hollowed his heart and centuries wrapped him in shadow, there lived a man whose name carried honor through war-torn valleys. Blade in hand, he was a prince, a defender of his homeland, a figure carved by loyalty, devotion, and the fierce responsibility of leadership. That man bore the name Dracula not as a curse, but as a badge forged in fire. Yet time, merciless, unblinking, reduced that man to an echo, a whisper carried through the corridors of eternity. Across the ages, that lost humanity lingers like a ghost behind his crimson gaze. It flickers in the stillness before dawn, in the rare moments when hunger withdraws and the memory of warmth tries, briefly, to surface. But immortality is an unforgiving sculptor. Every decade chisels away another fragment of the man he once was, until the warrior prince becomes a myth, and the myth rots into monstrosity. His tragedy lies not in becoming a vampire, but in remembering, dimly, painfully, what it meant to be human. There was a breaking point, a night where the world shifted beneath him, not through power, but through desperation. Mortality had cornered him, loss had consumed him, grief hollowed him until only rage remained. Legend whispers that the transformation came as a choice, but desperation is not choice, it is surrender. The darkness that embraced him offered solace, but demanded a price far greater than the life he fled. It demanded his soul, his memory, his tenderness, his capacity to love without devouring. Thus began the slow unraveling. The vampire's immortality is not a gift. It is a blade dragged endlessly against the mind. Each century carved a deeper wound. Faces he once cherished returned to dust. Voices he loved faded into silence. Wars he fought became stories, then myths, then nothing. Even the land he vowed to protect changed beneath his feet, slipping further from memory until the very soil felt foreign. For humans, grief ends. For Dracula, grief repeats. This endless cycle twisted him. Humanity decayed, not in an instant, but in centuries of erosion. A mind built for mortal time cannot bear infinite solitude without fracturing. And so he became two beings trapped within one body, the monster that stalks the night, and the shattered man imprisoned beneath centuries of hunger. The duality torments him. The human remnant remembers compassion. The monster cannot feel it. The human still remembers love. The monster can only mimic it. The human recalls warmth. The monster knows only the cold ache of the tomb. This is Dracula's eternal struggle, a mind at war with itself. He fears no enemy, no cross, no blade, no dawn. But there is one fear that grows deeper than all others, a fear that gnaws at the fragments of his lost humanity, a fear older than death, the fear of being forgotten. For what is immortality if the world forgets the man behind the myth? What is eternal life if the memories of one's existence fade like dust on abandoned stone? Dracula's terror is not of the stake, nor of the sun. It is the terror that when the final night comes, no soul will remember the prince he once was. No one will speak his name with reverence. Only the monster will remain in the world's memory, while the man disappears forever into the abyss. This fear shapes every act, every hunger, every cruelty. It drives his desire for control, for connection, for domination, for seduction. Not merely the thirst for blood, but the desperate craving for permanence. Every victim becomes a testament to his existence. Every whispered legend, every frightened tale, every midnight encounter ensures that his name survives. Dracula clings to infamy because fame, any fame, is the only anchor left to the remnants of his humanity. Symbolism wraps around his tragedy like the mist around his castle towers. His existence becomes the embodiment of the human struggle between darkness and light, between desire and restraint, between survival and surrender. In Dracula's journey, mortals glimpse their own inner battles, the longing to be remembered, the fear of losing the self, the temptation of power, and the slow erosion of identity through loss and time. But his tragedy is deeper still. For while humans fear dying, he fears living forever. While humans fear darkness, he fears what light would reveal. While humans cling to love, he clings to the memory of what love once felt like. Dracula is both monster and man, predator and mourner, immortal and broken. His mind is not merely a labyrinth of shadows. It is a battlefield scarred by centuries of war against his own soul. And in that battlefield lies the final truth of his existence. Dracula terrifies not because he is inhuman, but because he was once exactly like us, and still is, in the most haunting ways.